Here at Modern Piranha, we try to focus on aspects of history that have been forgotten, especially cultural movements that seem to have been swept under the rug of time. For example, everyone knows about the two world wars, but the fact is that in between them, there was a huge explosion of art and culture on 3 continents, one that in our opinion rivals those wars in importance. That part usually isn't taught in schools. I mean, Jesus, they were doing primitive sampling in the 1920s. Yes, the same kind of sampling used in hip-hop, although there wasn't a direct lineage from one to the other. The seeds of modern Hollywood and today's drug-based organized crime were planted in that era, but as far as modern relevance, fruity cocktails are one of the most prominent relics of that time. Straight up. Anyway, the focus of our Other Map series is currently on the Caribbean, because its vital role in world cultural history has sort of been sidelined or parted out. You may know about the unique culture of Key West, Florida, or that there are pre-contact Mayan ruins near Cancun. But you probably wouldn't know that Key West is about as far from Cancun as San Diego is from San Francisco. Today, we'll be looking at a combination of both of these things, a spot on the Caribbean Sea with an epic, obscured past. Now, when it comes to the Caribbean, when I say an island with heavy casino culture, you might think about Cuba. When I say a financial capital on the shore, you might think Panama. Pirate hangout might bring to mind Jamaica. Prostitute-friendly may remind you of Amsterdam. And a history of cannibalism might make you think of Lake Tahoe? I don't know. But I do know one place you almost certainly didn't think about just now. Texas. Yes, that gun-centric fairyland where everything is bigger. But I'm not talking about the whole state. This historic capital of awkward eating habits, piracy, gambling, ladies of the night, and finance sits on one small island off the state's coast in the Gulf of Mexico. The city that covers this island was also a pivotal port and was so resilient it rebuilt itself after a major natural disaster. But the craziest thing to me is that today it's not any of those things. In 2020, it's more or less just a unique beach town right next to Houston. This island city's name is Galveston. We could start at the beginning, but let's start at the most boring part, the present. Galveston appears to be geared towards family-fun tourists. Like, I don't know what else is really going on. There is, like I said, the beach, and remnants of the city's past in its architecture and its somewhat large collection of museums. So far, so normal, but it's only been this way since the late 1950s. The end of that decade saw a progressive crackdown on what was, up until that point, a very, very different city. It was a bribe-heavy entertainment capital nicknamed the Free State of Galveston. Things were ridiculously corrupt in Galveston, but it saw little violence, which is because it was dominated by one organized crime outfit, the Maceo family. Al Capone once considered muscling his way in, but decided against it, and that was a good call. The city wasn't huge, meaning there wasn't much turf to fight over, and if you were dumb enough to move in on it, Rose Maceo, the enforcer of the family, would make sure that move would be short-lived. And Sam Maceo, charismatic deal-maker of the family, had lots of friends in the government and in high society. These brothers, the co-heads of the Maceo enterprise, owned many casinos in the city, and made sure that the others operated with their permission. In reality, the Maceos arguably invented the modern casino. Putting fine dining, entertainment, and gambling under one roof was a fairly novel concept, and casinos such as their Hollywood Dinner Club and Balinese Room were groundbreaking establishments. Celebrities and politicians often visited, and tourists came from all over the nation and the world. Galveston was Las Vegas before Las Vegas. In fact, Sin City is where the Maceo family's attention went once the writing was on the wall for the Free State. These days, Station Casinos, a company run by Maceo descendants and traded on the stock market, is a major force in Las Vegas. The company owns around 70 casinos today, including 4 high roller locations: the Palace Station, the Red Rock Resort, Green Valley Ranch, and, as of a 2016 purchase from the Maloof family, they now own the Palms Casino Resort. The Maceos saw success during the Prohibition era, and with their help, Galveston rode out the Great Depression and the economic shifts of World War II. The city saw low unemployment throughout that era, which is uncommon in the States. There was also a large number of women working as prostitutes. It wasn't uncommon for there to be around 500 prostitutes at work at any given time during the Free State era, most of them working in brothels along Post Office Street. This red light district, also known as the Line, was recognized by politicians as a necessary evil, as it provided an additional tourist draw. It also gave independent women a way to earn a lot of money in an era when women were barred, implicitly or explicitly, from most employment. In fact, the prostitution industry rivaled the casino business as far as dollars made, in some years exceeding it, and women made crazy money. Many would work in Galveston for a few years and move on, set for life, which is a far cry from the trafficking-heavy industry we see today, although that was already a factor. However, positions in vice and prostitution were not the only jobs in Galveston. It was also a major port for much of its existence. A monopoly within the port, which was under the control of the Seeley family, gave rise to accusations of price gouging, and partially contributed to the gradual shift to Houston as the port of choice throughout the early 20th century. By the time of the discovery of oil, Houston had a fully functional port, and Galveston was to play a minor role, a role that continues to this day. But historically, the port of Galveston dominated Texan trade since it was first settled by the Europeans. For much of its existence, it was directly competing with New Orleans as the largest exporter of goods in the Gulf of Mexico. Due to railroad construction, it became easier for much of the country to ship through Galveston than down the Mississippi past New Orleans, which made trade in the city boom. The end of this era would be in the early 20th century, with the dredging of the canal that makes the Port of Houston possible. But the monopoly I mentioned was only part of why shipping moved to Houston. There was also worry that a major hurricane would hit Galveston and destroy it and its port. This was pretty well founded, as it had just happened. The town had been devastated by what is known as the Great Galveston Hurricane in the year 1900. Actually, devastated is an understatement. The island, which had been around 5 feet above sea level, had no cliffs or seawalls to absorb the storm surge, and, due to construction norms at the time, it wiped out the vast majority of the town's buildings, killing 8,000 people. Witnesses describe a wave of debris the size of a skyscraper moving across the island, destroying anything in its path, and normally harmless objects whipping through the air at fatal speeds. Yeah, I wouldn't want to have been there either. However, what's most notable to me about this terrible event, which is, as of 2020, still the worst such disaster the USA has ever seen, is that Galveston rebuilt without blinking an eye. The town was razed. Houses were put on stilts as ground was poured underneath them, sometimes as much as 13 feet of sand, and a gigantic seawall was constructed. Needless to say, it weathered the storms that would follow with much less damage done. But why did Galvestonians go to the trouble of rebuilding? Because they were a very proud people. Before the hurricane, and to a degree after, Galveston was by far the most interesting and important city between New Orleans and San Francisco. It was the largest city in Texas and, more or less due to its port, wealthy enough to be known as the Wall Street of the South. This came with class, as it was also known as the New York of the Gulf. That last one may seem like it was a hollow nickname given by a local salesman, but it came from newspapers in the north. Apparently, the city was something unique even before it was utterly destroyed. One disaster the city almost completely dodged was the Civil War, and not because there wasn't danger. The island was occupied by both armies, and yet managed to survive relatively unscathed. In fact, the island actually prospered, as boats would use the island's beaches to smuggle goods onto the mainland while the Union was shutting down southern ports. It had been rich before the war, and once the port had opened again, things were going even better. But the island has always been an interesting place. Before it was Texas, the island played host to a settlement named Campeche, the headquarters of sorts for notorious pirate John Lafitte. This is where his men, and others, would bring pirated goods that were sold later in New Orleans. Lafitte, who lived an insanely epic life, would spend the later years of it here. Supposedly he passed in 1823, but no one knows for sure. And finally, the island of Galveston has had at least one confirmed case of cannibalism. European accounts describe the native Karankawa tribe as being cannibals, so there is that, but you definitely cannot trust early European writing about indigenous Americans. However, a party of Spaniards landed on the island and, due to lack of food, ate one another until only one remained. In short, native cannibals? Maybe. European cannibals? Definitely. Fast forward through all that all over again, and if you weren't going out of your way to hit a museum on the island, you'd probably have no idea all that stuff went down. Galveston really doesn't seem too special these days. However, I'd hope you agree with me at this point that it has been one of the most dynamic cities in U.S. history. From the New York of the Gulf to Las Vegas before Las Vegas, Galveston has been through some insane times, often dodging events that hit the rest of the country hard, like the Civil War and the Great Depression, although one time it got blown to bits by Mother Nature. It says something that arguably the second worst thing to ever happen to the city was law and order being implemented. After the Maceos left and the Prostitutes were forced underground, things sure got a lot cleaner and a whole lot less interesting. But we'll see. If the timing's right and with a little luck, Galveston may indeed start to sparkle again. Who knows? Those stars have aligned before. And this has been The Other Map. From right here, you can like the video, you can subscribe or watch some other ones, all of which I encourage you to do. However, if you're nasty, you can also check out the Modern Piranha Patreon via the link below. Peace out, have a good one.